Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Between Monsters and Men. Today we will be looking into the mysterious Dudleytown. Dudleytown was a small village that was an isolated part of Cornwall, Connecticut. It was founded in the 1700s, and at the height of its popularity there was an estimated 26 families living within. The village now looks as it did the day that it was founded, with just cellar holes and skeletal remains of its leftover foundations. Not even animals take residence in these thick woods, leaving the eerie village in a ghostly silence. Shadowed by 3 large mountains and rocky terrain, made it hard for farmers to farm and for the villagers to live. But it wasn't the sparse food that was killing the villagers and leaving this small village in desperate mystery. England, 1510. Edmund Dudley is beheaded by King Henry VII for trying to overthrow the king. On this day of his beheading, someone or something placed a curse on the rest of the Dudley descendants. Shortly after this, Edmund's son John Dudley attempted to take control over the British throne by arranging for his own son Guilford to marry Lady Jane Grey. This failed and ended with the execution of Lady Jane and John and Guilford Dudley. After the execution, Guilford's brother, whom was a military officer, returned from France and with him brought home a plague that wiped out a massive number of British soldiers and spread throughout the country, killing thousands. 1745. Thomas Griffith settles in the area that would later be named Dudleytown, Connecticut. 1748. Gideon Dudley buys land from Mr. Griffiths so that he may start a small farm. 1753. Gideon Dudley's 2 brothers, Barzillai and Abiel, also purchase land nearby, and the 3 brothers give the little village its names. Within the following years, a Martin Dudley from a different line of the family moves from Massachusetts and into the area where he marries Gideon's daughter. Soon after, more townsfolk begin to come. The Tanner family, the Joneses, the Pattersons, the Dibbles, and the Porters. After this, the town grew away from farming and into mining the iron ores that were discovered nearby. This leads a small village to lean on the towns nearby for food and water. The small village was so petite that it had no stores, shops, schools, or churches. Due to this, once one would die, their body would need to be taken to Cornwall to be buried in a cemetery. 1759. Abiel Dudley loses his entire fortune and can't pay his debts. His property is taken away. He soon loses his mind and becomes a ward of the village. After this, a Nathaniel Carter buys his house. 1763. Nathaniel abandons his living in Dudleytown and moves his wife and 4 children to Binghamton, New York. At one point, the Carters moved to Delaware, in the middle of an Indian territory. During this time, they are attacked by the natives. Nathaniel, his wife, and his infant child were killed, and their 3 other children were abducted and taken to Canada. In Canada, the 2 daughters were ransomed, but the son, David Carter, remained with the natives, married an Indian woman, and later returned to the United States to further his education. He would later edit newspapers and become a justice on the Supreme Court. August 1774. The cholera plague sweeps through Dudleytown, taking the lives of Adoniram Carter's family, brother of Nathaniel Carter. 1792. 7 years before Abiel Dudley passes away, his good friend and former neighbor, Gershon Hollister, died while building a barn. Some speculate if he had fallen to his death or was killed. April 1804. General Herman Swift, a man who served under George Washington in the Revolutionary War, suffers tragedy at Dudleytown when his wife, Sarah Fay, is struck by lightning on their front porch and killed instantly. After this, some claim that General Swift became slightly demented. A Mr. Tanner was also said to have gone insane, but this was possible through old age, rather than otherworldly influence. He lived to the ripe age of 104, which back then was phenomenal. According to the records, he was also slightly demented by the time of his death, but throws the story off to paranormal was that he claimed to have told other villagers about strange creatures that came out of the woods at night. This may be the ramblings of an old man, but there is another resident who claimed the same thing, which we'll be getting to shortly. Over the years, it's been reported that a woman named Mary Cheney committed suicide in Dudleytown. However, local historians disputed this report. Mary Cheney died of lung disease and had in fact never visited Dudleytown. Over the next 100 years, the population dwindled to almost nothing. Children grew up, married, and moved on. 1901. The last resident, John Patrick Brophy, and his wife was next on the curse list. John's wife died of consumption, which back then was of the normal. Unfortunately, afterwards, his 2 children mysteriously disappeared into the woods, never heard of again. After, John's home burned down, possibly by his own hands. And then John also walked away from Dudleytown to never have been seen again. And then Dudleytown was deserted completely. 1903. Cancer specialist Dr. William Clark came to Cornwall, Connecticut from New York City. Falling in love with the scenery, he bought some land off Dark Entry Road where he would build a cabin for himself and his wife, Harriet Banks Clark. They would often spend their weekends at this cabin. In 1917, Harriet was diagnosed with a chronic illness that some say was tuberculosis. Around 1918, Dr. Clark left Dudleytown on emergency leave to New York, leaving his wife behind. After returning 3 days later, he found that she had gone insane, making claims that the strange creatures came out of the forest and attacked her. After this, she committed suicide in their New York home. This event wouldn't stop Dr. Clark's affair with Dudleytown. He would often bring friends and associates on his weekend getaways, and even his new wife after he remarried. Soon others would begin to move back to the village. In December 1924, together with friends, Dr. Clark formed the Dark Entry Force Association, which was formed to be mostly a nature preserve. The Dark Entry Force Association still owns most of the land today, and since the late 1990s, they no longer allow hikers to go on their land due to vandalism. Whether there was a curse or not, the story circulated and attracted witches, cultists, and satanists to visit the area. And although forbidden, this hasn't stopped daring hikers and ghost hunters to travel to the narrow trails to Dudleytown. Records do state that before Dudleytown was founded, it was once belonged to the Mohawk Indian tribe. But the records tell us little of the first settlers. People who visit boast about paranormal photographs, overwhelming feelings of terror, mysterious lights, sights, and sounds, being touched, pushed, and scratched by unseen hands. Unfortunately, what is left of Dudleytown, as mentioned, has been vandalized. No buildings are standing, and there has been theorized that the soil is contaminated by lead. Reverend Gary Dudley, a Dudley family genealogist, says that there was never a curse. He points out that the first published mention of his curse was found in the book They Found a Way, written by Stephen Day Press in 1938. To further disclose that there is no hereditary curse bound to this land is this fact. William Dudley, the Dudley that came to America, and his children, who named Dudleytown, would have been the son of Robert Dudley of England that the curse was put on, but he wasn't. Robert Dudley had only 2 sons, and one of them died while still a child, and whilst the rest of his descendants remained in England. There is no link between the cursed Dudley and the ones who named Dudleytown. Let's also bring up that 3 of the Dudleys moved out of the region and lived long, full lives, dying of natural causes. Famous demonologist, author, and ghost hunter Ed Warren stated, "The curse in Dudleytown started after the village became a thriving town. People went mad and reported seeing monstrosities in the forest, things that were not natural. Everyone left town." Do I believe there is a curse? I am a bit skeptical myself, to be honest. Curses can follow families, they can stick to lands, they can stick to one single person. Curses are evil. They are practically contagious. I don't think that the Dudley men were cursed. If it were just them, then just their family would be destroyed, and not everyone around them. Does that mean the land is cursed? It is quite possible in my belief. I noticed through my research that no one cared to ask the Mohawk tribe, if there is still one in the area, if they had any ancestral stories about the land that could potentially resemble after the Dudleys arrived. It may have provided some information. Maybe there were native beliefs of monsters in the area, wendigos, two-faced demons, the sorts, but we don't know because we never asked. Were there any deaths of the natives? Any of them going crazy? Again, no one knows, except for them if they had kept the stories. That'd be the only thing that can prove to me, at least, if there is a genuine curse on the land. Let's get back to that lead theory. Metals within ground, even stones, have a way of collecting energy. Places with large amount of limestone generally have greater chance of paranormal activity. And not just that, lead is poisonous, especially if ingested. If lead is in the ground, being absorbed into the crops they eat and into the water they drink, it is definitely possible for them to get mysterious illnesses and go demented or insane. Lead can cause damage to the brain, kidneys, stomach, and nervous system, ultimately producing hallucinations, comas, seizures, mood changes, memory loss, messed up sleep patterns, and much more. It can slow down the thought process and growing process of children as well. It can cause violent sicknesses. If the villagers mined the iron ore and lead was in the ground around it, the lead was disturbed and then became airborne as well, being ingested in that way. Usually large amounts of lead poison that probably would have caused this much damage would have been from pollution, such as manufacturing, paint, makeup, and the such. But I do not know if there was any actual testing on the land to see how much lead is within it. It could very much well be enough to kill off people, make them go insane, and even keep animals from entering. What do you believe? Do you think it was a curse, or something more scientific, or both? YouTube is demonetizing videos like mine. So if you like the dark, mysterious, and true crimes, please check out my Patreon page. Become a Patreon if you please. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more haunting, cryptids, and true crime stories.